Good morning. Thank you all for coming this morning. I am Marilyn Johnson, the chairperson of the Vallas for All Chicago Committee, and I'm pleased to have been asked to introduce Paul today. Paul's enormous contributions to the city and his extraordinary humanitarian work in Haiti, Chile, and elsewhere in the globe are well documented. In particular, his tenure as CEO of the Chicago Public Schools serves as a national model and drew national attention and praise. President Bill Clinton observed that Paul's work was a model for the nation. In a similar vein, President Barack Obama commented that Paul's later work in post-Katrina New Orleans had become a model for nationwide school reform. U.S. News and World Report once characterized Paul as one of the 20 best leaders in America. But Paul, as he makes his announcement this morning that he is a candidate for mayor, can and will tell you, I'm sure in very great detail, what he has been doing during his what he has done during his storied career of public service, and more importantly, how he would approach leading our great city. I'm here to tell you who he is, what is in his character and in his values, and why these things make him uniquely equipped to be mayor of the city of Chicago. Paul was born and raised in the Roseland community. He and Sharon raised their sons here in Chicago. He has worked from a very early age in a variety of capacities. I first met Paul over 30 years ago when he was the revenue director for the city of Chicago, and I was a lawyer for the city. Back then, Paul was, and he continues to be to this day, a man of great integrity and honesty. There is no gamesmanship or favoritism in his worldview. He is open and fair, no matter who you are, or where you live, or what you have or don't have. He is a dedicated and tireless worker. He's a problem solver. This attribute is particularly important for the future of this city because we stand at a crossroads where we've come to realize that conventional measures and the status quo can't be sustained. The city can't tax its way to fiscal health. Paul has always been able to fathom people's needs and accomplish solutions for all. As CEO of CPS, he realized that something as basic as the availability of food to students over a weekend when they otherwise would not have food to eat was important for many school communities. And he established an initiative of providing that food to bridge students from Friday to Monday. Finally, and most importantly, he engages with people in a way that is real. He has forged lasting relationships with people from all walks of life in all areas of the city. He has a fundamental recognition that Chicago will not accede to true greatness unless all of its citizens have opportunities to succeed and to thrive together. It is this value which has formed and informed his recent work with local authorities on criminal justice reform initiatives and providing meaningful training and education for ex-offenders, for veterans, and for those in marginalized communities. All of these qualities speak to the fact that Paul is a leader, and he is the leader that Chicago needs. It is my honor and great pleasure to introduce a leader for all Chicago, my friend, Paul Vallas.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Marilyn. Are there any questions? This is where we cut it and we send it to my mother, okay? Well, first of all, thank you so much. I'm announcing my candidacy today for the office of mayor. I'm a grandson of Greek immigrants and was born and raised on the south side of Chicago in the Roseland community. In fact, I was born in Roseland Hospital. I've been a public servant my entire life, never turning down a request for help wherever it was needed and regardless of the conditions or the financial sacrifices required. The majority of my public service years have been spent helping cities and sometimes even helping countries. I'm running because the city's in deep trouble, and I have the experience and the track record of success to offer and implement solutions to effectively and affordably address the city's issues in a financially responsible way. Let me be specific about what I think those issues are. The population exodus. Chicagoans are leaving our city in droves as record numbers of people are exiting, as they see opportunities declining, and as they go through the experience of a ever-increasing and rising cost of living. And as you know, when the population declines, the tax base is diminished, which means higher taxes, fewer services for the remaining residents, which then means naturally the cycle continues and the cycle deepens. I'm running to reverse that exodus by developing budgets and implementing multi-year financial plans that invest in programs and initiatives that will create an environment conducive for city growth. The recurring financial crises. Both the city and the schools have been financial disaster areas. By avoiding the tough decisions like pension funding, by deferring critical actions until after the election, ultimately and inevitably driving up the costs to taxpayers and taxing people and businesses out of the city. I intend to make the tough decisions, the decisions that are needed to be made, and I intend to do that on day one. I intend to make the type of decisions that I had to make that enabled me to balance 10 straight budgets at the city and in the Chicago Public Schools, and that resulted in 13 bond rating upgrades. Taxes, fees, fines. They are punishing working families, and they are hurting small businesses. Does the city even have a tax policy or a revenue-generating philosophy? I'm going to take a progressive approach to raising new revenues and examine the fairness of the city's existing revenue-generating structures in order to ensure that there is fairness and that working families are not being driven out of the city and the business climate is not deteriorating. Violence. Murder and violence in the city have become a national disgrace. There are more murders in Chicago each year than the cities of LA and New York combined. I intend to present a plan to provide police with the resources and the supports that they need, just as I did when I was city budget director, and I was able to finance the deployment of 13,500 police officers. All neighborhoods need to be safe. All neighborhoods need to be secure. Neighborhood neglect. There have been aggressive and sometimes expensive efforts to lure corporate giants to the city. I'm all for the luring of the corporate giants, but the South and West Side neighborhoods, until recently, have been all but ignored. There are communities, there are neighborhoods in the city that have not recovered from the 2008 recession, and if you look at the newspaper stories that were done a couple weeks ago, there are communities and neighborhoods on the West Side that haven't recovered from the '68 riots. I support efforts to attract new businesses, but I'm going to be the neighborhood candidate, and I'm going to prioritize where people live. I will ensure that city resources are delivered equitably and to the communities most in need. Schools in constant crisis, allergy season. School enrollment continues to decline as City Hall's micromanagement has resulted in four CEO changes in 7 years, constant financial uncertainty, dozens of schools being closed in struggling neighborhoods with no plans to repurpose those buildings as they are allowed to rot and lose value. At the same time, tens of millions of dollars in contracts that revenues of which could have gone to local school budgets have been diverted to sometimes highly suspect no-bid contracts or awarded to politically connected companies. I will end the practice of using our schools as a political cash cow for politically connected contractors and contributors, and I'll set budget priorities while making contract decisions that are in the best interests of the children. And furthermore, I will not close schools without a clear justification, without real community input, and without a specific community-approved plan to repurpose those buildings. I know how Chicago should be managed. My record in Chicago and elsewhere proves it. My management does not focus on the next election, the next fundraiser, or who my next opponent might be. I will not manage by polling to see what's popular and unpopular before making decisions. My decision-making will be determined by what's best for all Chicagoans today and in the future. And my management is an approach that understands that the role of the budget is to make the type of investments and provide the type of services that improve the quality of life for all Chicagoans, and to do so in a way that's affordable and equitable. You know, Marilyn commented on my record, and I put together a nice little factual list of things that we were going to accomplish both as budget director and as CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, because this is going to be a campaign where opponents are going to have a lot of money to misrepresent records, and they're going to try to say things that are factually incorrect, and they're going to believe that if you say it enough times, people will begin to believe it. The bottom line is I balanced 3 consecutive budgets. Remember the Barney budgets? When I took over as budget director, we put 13,500 police officers on the street. We didn't have to borrow. We didn't have to underfund our pension systems. And we developed a type of long-term financial plan that not only brought financial stability to the city's budget, but increased bond ratings. And when I took over the Chicago Public Schools in 1995, they had a projected $1.2 billion structural deficit. And we balanced our 6 consecutive budgets. And we earned 12 bond rating upgrades. And we never increased property taxes beyond the cap. And at that same time, we also spent $3.2 billion building new schools and renovating existing schools. And we did it in such a responsible way that no more than 6% of our budget was ever dedicated to debt service. And in the process, we recognized that neighborhoods, that neighborhood revitalization, that the city is only as strong as its weakest neighborhood. So the vast majority of those schools went into the hard-pressed neighborhoods, went into minority communities, 78 schools, 78 new school buildings. And to make sure that the public, that everyone shared in the largesse of this investment, we required that half of all those contracts went to minority and women-owned businesses. So we pulled those contracts out of the Public Building Commission so that we could make them, make those projects independent of the political process of contract allocation. And we did that, by the way, with Mayor Daley's support. And we not only allocated 50% of our contracts to minority-owned businesses, we allocated close to 54% of our contracts, $1.72 billion in construction contracts went to women and minority-owned businesses. And we not only required that we have 50% MBEWB, we also required that half those who were hired be minority, and that half those be hired be city residents. So 58% of the hours that were worked went to minority workers, and over 50% were individuals who lived in the city. Now, why did we do that? Because we were trying to do something that was politically correct? No. If we were going to invest in the community, we needed to make sure that schools were built in the community where they were needed. Tearing down those prefab schools on the west side, not just the Willis Wagons, but those prefab schools on the west side, and replacing them with brick and mortar schools. Not allowing Mendel to be a 40-acre hole in the ground in the heart of the Roseland community and building Southside College Prep when they wanted to build Northside College Prep. Or taking the old Brownsville military, the Brownsville Armory, the abandoned armory, and opening the Brownsville Military Academy, or opening Walter Payton before they tore down Cabrini Green, or rebuilding Lindblom, or rebuilding Jones, or for that matter, rebuilding King, because we just got tired of failing schools being named after the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. So at the end of the day, these were not poll-tested ideas or poll-tested decisions. These were decisions we made because these were decisions that would have a direct impact in the community. And let me tell you, during that period, our enrollment grew by 30,000. We grew our way out of our problems, and we grew our way to budget surpluses and budget reserves in the area of hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't get 12 consecutive bond ratings by kicking the can down the road. and you don't get 12 bond ratings by deferring your pension obligations and not ensuring that the pension system is fully funded. So how am I going to approach this? I'm going to approach this as if I've just been elected mayor. And what I'm going to do in the coming weeks and months is I'm going to go out there, and every week or every other week, I'm going to talk about a specific issue. I'm going to talk about that issue with the level of detail as if I was bringing this before the city council. Who knows? Maybe the city council will see some good ideas out there, and they may decide to move and to implement things that I'm going to be recommending even before the election day. The objective here is to run a campaign with great specificity. I'm running to win, but I'm also running to generate ideas. And if what emerges from this campaign is a campaign of ideas, a campaign of discussion of the real issues, a campaign that seeks real solutions, and whoever wins, those solutions become reality, those solutions are actually implemented and sustained, then it would have well been worth the effort. So that's what this is about. So you're all going to get an opportunity to get the details. I'm going to talk, number one, about how you balance this budget and how you lay out a long-term financial plan so that your budget becomes a vehicle for investment, a vehicle for investing in police and infrastructure, a vehicle for investing in quality schools. And I'm going to lay that out in detail. I'm going to present a plan, which I will next week, on how to revitalize the police department, on how to give the police department the resources and the supports that they need to be effective. And it's going to be a detailed plan. And it's going to be a plan to talk about not only how to do it and how to fund it. Because safe neighborhoods need to be safe. And we need to continue to ensure that our safe neighborhoods are safe, and we need to take our unsafe neighborhoods and make them safe. And that means all neighborhoods need to have the public safety resources that they need and deserve, and yet the police need those additional resources so that they can be deployed to areas where they're most needed. There's a city in this country that has had a 90% decline in their murder rate. A 90% decline from 2,200 to, what is it, less than 300. How does that happen? That happens when a police department is supported and resourced, and when there's consistency and continuity in the management of those resources and those supports. So I'm going to lay out my plan, and I'm going to do that next week. I'm going to talk about pensions. I'm going to lay out my ideas on how to approach the remaining pension issues and get those pension issues resolved once and for all. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do on infrastructure. And look, I'm all for the big mega-funded infrastructure projects. I recognize the importance of these major projects and major initiatives, but I'm concerned about neighborhood infrastructure. I'm concerned about available parking for businesses. I'm concerned about the issue of lead contamination in our water. And what we're going to tell these homeowners, many of whom are on the verge of losing their property because they can't afford to pay their property taxes, you know, what are they going to do when they have to decide between maybe paying their property taxes or putting food on the table and raising the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that they're going to have to raise to replace the pipes so that they are able to connect to the main lines so that they can ensure that they have clean water. So I'm going to lay out very specific ideas and proposals on how we're going to do that and how those issues are going to be resolved, because neighborhood infrastructure is important. And I want to prioritize neighborhood infrastructure. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the schools. I know a little about the schools. And I'm going to talk about how the schools are going to be revitalized and how the school budgets are going to be made and reprioritized. You know, we can talk about all we want about how we want to do, universal four-year-olds. We want to put universal four-year-olds in preschool. But guess what? When the vast majority of the brain development occurs between the prenatal phase and the 3-year-old phase, don't we think that that's an area of interest? Don't we think that that's an area that needs to be prioritized? So career and technical education. Now, whether we like it or not, the dynamic is changing, and we're going to have to provide the career and technical educational options for our students to prepare them for the jobs of today and for the jobs of tomorrow. And I'm going to lay out a strategy on how to do that and how to do that within existing budget constraints. And then finally, I'm going to lay out a strategy, a very specific strategy, on what to do with this huge population of 17 to 40-year-olds who are either TANF, ex-offenders, chronically unemployed, high school dropouts, disenfranchised veterans. What are we going to do about that population? And in some communities, that population constitutes the majority of men in those communities. And what are we going to do about them? What's going to be our strategy and what's going to be our policy? And you know, I had the privilege of spending about a year and a half visiting different states and visiting different prisons and visiting various communities as part of U.S. Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General's initiative to transform education in the federal prison system. The idea was, how do we deal with this population of ex-offenders? How do we deal with this population of individuals that need alternatives to incarceration by providing them with education and occupational training opportunities? So I'm going to lay out a plan. I'm going to lay out a very specific plan, because while I was doing the work at the national level, I was discovering things being done in states and being done in communities that can be transformational. So my intent here is to run an issue-oriented campaign by identifying the issues and by offering specific solutions that can be financed, solutions that can be implemented, because we can't wait. We can't wait to bring some financial stability and continuity and predictability to our financial situation. We can't wait to implement the type of education reforms in our school system so we can begin growing that school system again. We can't wait to get the lead out of the water of our city residents. We can't wait to begin really investing in job-creating opportunities and adult educational opportunities in communities where the vast majority of men are unemployed and in many cases are unemployable. We simply can't wait. We simply can't wait to get these things moving and to begin to address the serious issues that are plaguing our city. So it's going to be an interesting ride. It's the only type of campaign I know how to run. You know, I said when I decided to run that I would have to have, if I was going to be an effective candidate, I would have to have my comfort level. And my comfort level is talking about real solutions. I just hope during the course of the campaign that I can attract this type of attention when I come forward with specific recommendations and suggestions and resolutions to the problems that plague us. So in closing, I want to be the mayor. I want to be the mayor because I love this city. I want to be the mayor because in so many ways I'm a product of this city. Having spent 12 years working at City Hall as revenue director and as city budget director and as CEO, I think has well prepared me to not only identify clearly what the issues are facing the city, but also to help craft solutions for addressing those issues. But more importantly, I want to be mayor because I believe that I have the leadership that the city needs and that the city deserves. I look forward to laying out my specific thoughts and proposals in the coming weeks and months, beginning next week on public safety. I look forward to earning your trust. I am running to once again make Chicago a city of opportunity for all Chicagoans. And I ask Chicagoans who care about our city to join me in this cause. Thank you so much. Okay.